If it's about love, if it's about love.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Austin Haynes with the Waking Justice Project, and this is your daily wake-up call. Here's what the corporatocracy is up to today, October 2nd, 2019. You can visit our website at wakingjustice.org for more details. Here are the headlines. Today's Wednesday, and going forward, we're going to focus the whole program each Wednesday on whistleblowers, the folks who have worked to reveal the secretive corruption of the corporatocracy. For this first Whistleblower Wednesday today, we'll just cover the basics of this heroic form of activism. We'll give a quick overview of the whistleblower tradition in U.S. history and a quick summary of what we learned from each. So, Wikipedia defines whistleblowers as, quote, someone who exposes secretive information or activity that is deemed illegal or unethical within a private or public organization, unquote. In the current era of post-democracy America, where the U.S. has been transformed into a corporate plutocracy, we expand the definition of a whistleblower to include anyone who exposes secretive information or activity that is deemed illegal, unethical, or treasonous to the fundamental goal of restoring our democracy. Whistleblowing is a patriotic act of civil disobedience. Indeed, the U.S. was pretty much founded on whistleblowers. In 1773, Benjamin Franklin stole a series of secret letters written by the governor of the Massachusetts colony. The letters were written to a British official, calling on Britain to suppress the growing resistance to British rule over the American colonies. Benjamin Franklin gave the letters to Samuel Adams, who then made the letters public in a series of newspaper articles. Once the governor's subversive politics were exposed, the colonists were outraged and eventually organized the famous Boston Tea Party boycott. That boycott was one of the seminal events that led to the American Revolution, and the two, quote, whistleblowers of the Boston letters, Benjamin Franklin and Samuel Adams, went on to become two of the original authors of the U.S. Constitution. Just 7 months after the Declaration of Independence, one of the very first acts in the first session of the First Continental Congress was to pass the first law in the U.S. to protect whistleblowers. 10 American Navy and Marine officers had filed a complaint against the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy for his, quote, inhuman treatment of prisoners during the Revolutionary War. The first Congress considered the evidence, relieved the commander of his duties, and passed a new law to protect the officers and future whistleblowers. About 200 years later, in the early 1970s, three of the most famous whistleblower events in U.S. history all occurred back-to-back, within a year of each other. The Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, and the Powell Memo. We'll cover each of these events in detail in future editions of Whistleblower Wednesdays, but just briefly here. The Pentagon Papers were copies of a top-secret Defense Department report about the Vietnam War. The whistleblower, senior military analyst Daniel Ellsberg, made photocopies of the report and leaked it to the press. The leaks exposed various war crimes by the U.S. military and CIA, including the assassination of the president of South Vietnam. The Watergate scandal, leaked by the famous FBI officer nicknamed Deep Throat, exposed the illegal actions of President Richard Nixon, who hired former FBI and NSA officers to wiretap his political opponent in advance of their upcoming election. Nixon's crimes were exposed, and he became the first and only U.S. president to resign from office. And the Powell Memo was a secret advisory letter to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, written by Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell. The letter was effectively a call to arms to corporate elites on how corporate America should proceed to overtake all levers of democratic reform in our American democracy. The letter was leaked to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jack Anderson just after Powell was sworn in, so it didn't affect his appointment to the Supreme Court. But many independent journalists and scholars agree that those 3 whistleblower events in the early 1970s, the Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, and the Powell memo, signal the end of what was left of our representative democracy and began the rise of America's corporate plutocracy. All those whistleblowers and the journalists who published their leaks were widely hailed in the media back then as patriots and crusaders of truth and justice. Now, some 40 years later, the 3 most famous whistleblowers of the current era, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, and Julian Assange, have either been forced into exile or imprisoned for exposing the high crimes of the corporatocracy. Mainstream corporate media variously refer to these 3 as traitors, criminals, or even terrorists, and public opinion about these 3 is mixed at best. Over the coming weeks, each Wednesday, we'll highlight a specific whistleblower event, and we'll discuss it in detail, along with what we learned from the whistleblower. We'll get into the general psychology of these events, and whether these events confirmed our understanding of the corporatocracy or taught us something new. We'll also look at how the event was translated by the corporatocracy by both wings of its propaganda machine, big media and big politics. And finally, we'll deconstruct that propaganda to see how it played off of our personal biases. As always, thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it in your social networks. And if you want to learn how all of us in the work of global justice can join together in strategic boycott and force this corporatocracy to the people's bargaining table, to end all this injustice and corruption, and to save our planet, please check out our About page and listen to our first podcast at wakingjustice.org. We're running out of time, y'all. Join us. Peace.
You must be involved in the struggle for freedom and justice.
If it's about love, if it's about
Justice is waking, justice is rising. Justice is waking, justice is rising.
If it's
Justice
about
is
love,
waking, justice is rising. And it ain't just us, it's all of
If it's
us.
about
Justice is waking, justice is rising. And it ain't just us, it's all of us.
if it's about love.
May every soul unite, tend the fire and let old coals relight. I'm a citizen of the world and we fight for the rights of everybody to live a truly free life. Red or yellow, black or white, left or right, gay or straight, human or animal, all life. Cause what matters is what is in common. If you know it, stand tall and keep dropping the knowledge.
Justice is waking, justice is rising. And it ain't just us, it's all of us.
If it's about love.